Hi, beautiful souls. How are you? Welcome. Welcome to my Thursday night chat and full moon blessings. I just walked my dog and it was just a little bit cloudy out there. And so the full moon was she was just kind of hiding behind the clouds, looking a lot like a Halloween full moon. Anyway, so blessings to you on that. And I hope that on this night, there's a lot of energy that's universally affecting all of us. And this is a really beautiful time tonight to just kind of let go of some of that. Give yourself an opportunity to diffuse and just really just be in the energy. And if there's something you need to celebrate, then you can celebrate that as well too. But I feel this kind of real strong um, sense that everybody kind of needs to let a little bit of air out of the balloon tonight. So I would highly recommend doing that if you are still in that energy. So right here on the west coast of Canada, the full moon, I think it's around in about 2.5 hours. So you may have already experienced the full energy of the full moon. So tonight we're going to talk about actually how I view the tarot cards and not necessarily how I use them, but how I see them. How is this tool, how do I view the tool of the tarot cards? And that was something I thought that I answered last week, but one of the one of the viewers asked me to clarify that a little more. So I'm going to clarify that question, I hope. And if it's still not clear, please continue to ask me to kind of define that, because it's not an easy thing to define by any means. I'm going to also have a look at a couple more of the major cards tonight. So we'll talk about 8, the Strength card, and 11, the Justice card. And so if you want to pull out a couple of decks and just kind of have those cards handy when we're talking about them, that might help with the discussion a little bit. And I just wanted to mention that thank you. So I did a video thanking and beginning to celebrate 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And so if you go back in my videos, I think 2 videos back, you can go to that video and get the instructions for how to be a part of the 1,000 subscriber draw. There are 2 decks that I'm giving away as well as a reading. So you need to go into the comments of that video and to make your request there. And so there have already been lots of them, but not so many that it's definitely not still worth your time to make a comment there. Hi, Nina, Science to Soul Tarot with Jen. Hi, Jen. What kind of clients are you seeing, Jen? What do you do? Happy that you can pop on here. And Sherry, hi, welcome. So let's kind of start with the cards themselves. And if I repeat myself from a couple weeks ago, then please forgive me for that. Oh, you're a psychologist. So what time zone are you in that you're still working? I guess it's tomorrow for you already. Are you in Australia or? Hi, Laura. Yeah, I hope everyone's well. And I've already wished full moon blessings to everyone, and whatever time zone you're in. What I learned when I was doing my kind of training, shamanic training, was that we kind of have this window of 3 days before and 3 days after. So to make sure that you really, if this is a time where you need to diffuse a little energy, that you continue to kind of work with this full moon energy, and either to be in celebration and gratitude, or, it's a really wonderful opportunity to let go. So Australia at 1 p.m. on Friday. So it's tomorrow. Okay. So lovely that you're popping in. The tarot cards. So I think I was explaining how I go about doing a reading. So when I do a reading, I sit across the table usually. I do a lot of in-person readings. I do more in-person readings than I do online. And I find that it's a lot easier for me when I'm doing in-person readings, because I'm quite an empath, and so I can connect. But I do have I can share some other stories with telephone readings. It works exactly the same way. And so I'm connecting with this person through guiding them through a little meditation to help them to relax, help them to ground. And while I'm doing that, I'm tuning into their energetic body, and I can begin to feel in my physical body different sensations. So depending on what's going on with them, I can feel their anxiety or if they have pain or different kinds of trauma. And so that kind of lets me know what we're going to be talking about, what needs to be addressed, or perhaps what they don't want to talk about. And so through that space, giving that space for them to kind of dial it down, make the transition from whatever they were doing, shopping, working, to coming to the reading or driving, that just gives me a chance to really connect with them energetically. And so often what happens is there is so much information that I receive intuitively that way that it is, what I want to say, I don't even get to the cards. It's not even necessary to use any kind of oracle. I don't need to throw crystals or charms or anything or pull out cards because I already have enough information. However, saying that, I find that the person on the other side of the table needs the cards. They need the crystals. They need something concrete on the table to kind of make a connection to everything that I'm saying and everything that I'm feeling. Unless, of course, they are highly intuitive themselves and they're very comfortable just talking about, all this kind of stuff. So what the cards are, in my view, is, first of all, they're a confirmation of everything that I'm picking up on. And so they will reinforce, they will confirm, they will clarify whatever it is that I'm already tuning in on. And I said that some people, I might be picking up on something that they don't want to talk about. So often before I do my little meditation, I have them ask a question. Sorry, here I go again. I think I was burping last week. Anyway, the question is often hard for them to formulate. And I will, if they weren't able to kind of come up with a topic or a question, I'll address that again after we do the guided meditation. Is there something that came to your mind? Is there how are you feeling during that experience, right? So I'll try to get them to come up with some kind of a topic, some kind of a question. Often I know exactly where we need to go, but I want it to come from them if possible. Because sometimes what I'm picking up on, they don't want to talk about. If, however, they need to talk about it, again, that will be confirmed through the tarot cards. And the tarot cards will kind of go in that direction energetically, or more specifically with a certain picture, or there'll be a certain object and a certain card that will arise. And I know exactly that, okay, yes, indeed, I need to go there. So the cards are a Soul Stalker 5 high. The cards are I don't know, what's the word? What would you call them? They're like they direct the session. And that just really helps to give comfort, I think, also to the person across the table. And I said, well, if I'm doing a telephone reading, or if I'm doing a reading where the person is absent and it's either being responded to by email or a private YouTube video and they're not present in that conversation, how does this work if that's the way that I do a reading? Well, in a telephone reading or in a FaceTime reading, the same thing happens. I connect very deeply with whatever's going on. And I have actually, I was talking about this yesterday when I was at the shop, or trying to describe to somebody what it is that I do. What kind of a reader are you? What does a reading mean? Most of the people I read for end up crying. There's some sort of level of emotion that starts to bubble up to the surface. And sometimes it can be quite a lot of tears, and other times I can just see the emotion coming and the water at the corner of the eyes. And then I know also that I've hit a chord and there's something very real that needs to be shared and talked about and released. And so if I'm on a telephone with somebody, I have no problem with that kind of level of engagement. And so then the other piece is, what if they're not present? So what if I'm doing a distance reading, and how does that work? I wasn't going to talk about this tonight. Some of you know that I'm a Reiki master. I teach Reiki. I'm a Reiki practitioner, so I see clients in my home and all of that. How do you handle it if spirit tells you not to reveal something to a client? However, during the reading, the client expresses the very thing you were guided not to tell him, then you confirm it. Oh, it's so complicated. I'll tell you about a client. The client gets upset even though they confirmed it themselves. So there's been a client that's I've read for a couple of times, and so she's here in Canada. Her sister's in France, and her sister has cancer, and I'm not sure if she's home or she's in the hospital at that time. And the last time I saw her, she was just going to visit her sister. And then the story I'm telling you is about sometime later, she was back and she had her daughter with her in the store. And I was doing a reading for them. I think I did 2 readings, one for the mom, one for the daughter, one after the other. And in both readings, the death card came up, and also another card that just kind of really reinforced that it was really time for closure, to wind up the relationship with the aunt, with the sister, and to realize, well, that lots of things that were going on. And I really wanted to share the more kind of expanded view of the death card and what that means to me as a teacher, what that means to me as a yogi, and all of that. But I could tell in that moment, even though it was very emotional and very difficult, that both the daughter, who was quite young, I think she was under 16, and the mom, they both really needed to talk about death. They needed to talk about the experience of death, and they needed to just begin to put some words, on their mouth, and begin to say things. But before that actually happened, I really feel, Nina, that spirit was trying to get me to be more, just didn't want me to go there because it was so obvious what was going on. It wasn't necessary to talk about death. Spirit was guiding me to talk about the more of the process, or the journey, or how each of them should be focusing on their self-care at this time. But it was, so that was kind of a tricky situation. So I guess in answer to your question, I really just allow myself to be guided. And I have to trust, right? I really need to just kind of trust how things are going. It can be really, really difficult. And then, the same thing happens if you have somebody that's sitting there like this, right? And it's energetically, it's hard to get in through the barrier. But if you hit a nail on the head, and then the arms go up like this, and everything that comes out of their mouth or their body language is, they're either in denial, or everything is really negative or angry, then, that they're not ready to deal with it. So then what do you do? Which way do you go? Because you have cards on the table, you've hit a nail on the head, but then they're not open to going there. So that is one of the most difficult situations. I think that's even more difficult than when a topic comes up that is, you're not sure whether you should approach it. I had this happen, and the client got so upset. If they hadn't said it themselves, I would have. It's really, so just listen to yourself, listen to the feelings you have. We all receive messages in different ways, and for me, it's very clairsentient, right? I feel so much in my body. Sometimes it's clairaudient. Rarely is it clairvoyant. That doesn't happen too often. But these messages are pretty loud and clear most of the time. So I touched on, so what happens if they're not there? And I was talking to you about Reiki. I got distracted by Nina's question. So that's great. Please continue to ask questions. So when you are doing distance Reiki, I had a lovely teacher. It was a great class we had with Tadao Yamaguchi sensei. And he asked us, like, how do you think it works? Like, how does the universe share the energy? You are here and they are hundreds or thousands of miles away. And how does your focus, the energy that you are channeling reach that soul that is nowhere near you? And so we had this long discussion about all the possible ways that could work. And in his wisdom, in his experience, I should explain who he is. For those of you that know something about Reiki, in the Japanese tradition of Reiki, I'm talking about. So Usui Sensei is the one who's credited with kind of the founding of Reiki. And then in his direct lineage, the very last teacher that he taught was Hayashi Sensei. And Hayashi Sensei was the teacher of Yamaguchi Sensei, who died, I believe, about 10 years ago. And her son, so in a direct lineage, is the person that I'm talking about. So his name is Tadao Yamaguchi. And I had a course with Tadao in Vancouver, British Columbia. And it was during this conversation during this workshop that we talked about, like, how does the energy connect between you here and that person there? And I think what I gleaned from that course, that workshop, that particular day, when we were really focusing on the distance Reiki, was it applies exactly to doing tarot or anything else at a distance, any kind of reading, because you're connecting at a soul level with the person, who's far away from you. So what he described was the importance of calling in the energy of that person. So he had very, very specific instructions for how to do that. One was to have a name. And so when you're doing a reading for somebody, you know a little bit about them, you might know where they're from, but he wanted some really specific things, like a birth date with a birth year can really help it's just like a way of calling in the soul. So you could have different ways of doing that. You might have your own routines. And so I think, bye, Jen. Good luck with your next client. There's different ways to call in the energy of another. And so in that course, we were given very specific instructions how to call in the energy of that soul. And so it makes sense that when you are doing this work, it's kind of important that that person is not running a marathon. They're not speaking at a conference. They're not, busy doing something. Energetically, you want their soul to be at rest. And there's this part of me that thinks this is even really important when you're doing like an intuitive reading, a tarot reading. And I never thought about that until I had this conversation about exactly how does distance Reiki work. So yeah, so let me know what you think about that, because it's kind of a mystery, right? It really is a mystery. So if you are able to connect energetically with somebody who's really far away, then in theory, it all works exactly the same way, and the cards are going to come up and support that person and whatever it is they need to hear in exactly the same way. So yeah, so let me know if you have any more questions about that, or you want me to expand on that, and I'm happy to do that tonight or at a different time. A couple of weeks ago, we were looking at the Chariot card, and that conversation turned into a lot of detail, a lot of information. I had books and all kinds of decks around me, and I have done some preparation for tonight as well too, because these are two really, I don't know, it's tricky because we have this whole history of the tarot, the different forms that the tarot has taken, the different kind of decks that are available today, and how does this all kind of influence you as a reader, whether you're reading professionally or just reading for yourself? And to what degree do you need to understand how this has all evolved? And I think the short answer is you don't, because you are just picking up energetically on the cards that are present on the table at the time. But if you have a little bit of background, you're going to be more informed. And it's just really fascinating. It's really, really interesting. I mentioned a book about the miners a couple of weeks ago too that really influenced me. And I think if you are beginning to look at the Kabbalah and doing tree of life readings and things like that, you're going to be able to bring in connections between the Thoth and the RWS and the Marseille and other systems as well too. I think if you are really concerned about the 8s and the 11s and which one should come first and which kind of deck should I choose, that it would really be worth your while to begin to study a little bit about the tree of life and what is the correspondence, what are the correspondences between the actual points on the tree of life, the lines on the tree of life, and the different tarot cards, because that does kind of add a dimension that will bring more clarity. But saying that, there are so many systems and there are so many different beliefs and different structures that have been come up with through the many hundred years that the tarot has been used for divination and parlor games. So really it's a crapshoot. And you might really resonate with one kind of line of thinking and not so much with another. But for me, I think the way that I will continue to expand as a reader is by studying all of the patterns in the tree of life. And those connections resonate really deeply with me as a yogi, because there are also connections with the chakras through the tree of life. And so that piece really sits well. But I'm not going to dive too much into that tonight, because it's just so very, very big. I also shared this book with you a couple weeks ago. And I have to say, I'm really, really enjoying Bakara's sense of humor, the way she writes. I feel she's really connected on many levels to the cards and to the tarot. And it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. I have a lot of tarot books, and I'm really, really enjoying reading this one. So let's just kind of start. And I've pulled a few decks, and I've pulled some different decks tonight that I haven't shared on these chats, because it's fun to look at different cards, isn't it? Yeah. So let me know kind of where you sit with this. So let's just kind of start with strength as 8. And here's one. This is the numinous. Let's see if we can get some light here. That's not great. There we go. Maybe you can see it. So this is with a bear, and there's a man wrapped around the bear, as opposed to the lion, which is usually what you're going to see in the strength card. So we were looking at justice as, not justice, we were looking at the Chariot, which is number 7. And then next in the sequence, if you're with most of the current decks that are RWS clone, RWS based, so the next card is strength, that is 8. And I think it is important to acknowledge the sequence. And as a reader, excuse me, when I have a spread on the table, I'm always looking to look for patterns and for sequences in the reading, if there are multiple numbers that come up. So if we happen to have the Chariot and we have the Strength card and the deck I'm working with has Strength as 8, I'm going to acknowledge that sequence. I'm going to acknowledge that progress that's being made. I'm going to acknowledge that connection. I'm going to look for other 7s and look for other 8s. Because if the Strength card comes after the Chariot, it has different connotations than when it's going to come after the Wheel of Fortune. And after the Wheel of Fortune, that kind of inner strength that arises has slightly different nuances than that strength that we're talking about that comes after the Chariot. So in a short kind of answer to a lot of the questions I received about this, it really depends on the deck that you're working with. And I think you need to be fluid in working with a deck that has them in both positions. But I don't think you need to bring in the alternate or the nuances of having it in a different position in a given reading. So if you're reading with an RWS clone, then you should be reading Strength as 8. If you're reading with a Thoth clone or a deck that has chosen to place Strength at number 11, then I think you should be really contemplating, what does that inner strength mean when it comes after the Wheel? Because those are really subtle differences. In the one of the systems I was talking about, when we get to the 8th card, we're moving to a more internalization. So the first 7 cards are very, very active, and the Chariot is that last card where we're really in the physical world and we're very kind of ego-driven and it feels very external. The next 7 cards begin to take us more internal. And so both the 8th card and the 11th card, regardless of what they are more reflective cards, right? So they're looking at a different kind of layer, a different kind of level than the first 7 cards. So I think that in itself is a wealth of information. Okay, so these are not about the external world. However, a lot of readers, a lot of decks, a lot of guidebook writers talk very, very much about the Justice card as a very kind of practical justice in this 3-dimensional world. They talk about it as about being a card of legal issues, for example. And here's, I'm going to show you in a bit the Strength card from this deck. This is the Victorian Fairy. So even in this fairy deck, we have the Magistrate here sitting in the fairy world. And so this is an example of a Justice card that doesn't really tap into that other layer. That other layer being, this is so much more than what is right or wrong. This is so much more than legal matters. But what happens in a reading if you're really picking up on that legal stuff or the very practical issues? And so I want to kind of to get to that as well too. Keeping in mind that those cards, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 are really beginning to turn, in a more kind of intuitive, meditative kind of mood. All right, does that make sense? There are contradictions all through the tarot, right? There's no hard and fast rules. And that's why I say reading intuitively is so really important. But I'm giving you all this kind of extra stuff to contemplate because you can kind of weave this in, and this might help to understand and bring clarification. So even in the numinous, I showed you the Strength card. This is the Justice card from the Numinous. Sorry, these cards are not too bright. There we go. Oh, over here. So many symbols in this card. It's actually a really beautiful card. It almost looks more like a Temperance card. And perhaps that's a discussion for another chat. And that is what is the difference between justice and temperance? Because that's a whole other conversation. All right. So Strength as number 8. Let's go to that. And I'm going to share with you some beautiful words from Bakara Wintner. And I'll show you her Strength card. That's her Strength card. She talks a lot in this, well, it's actually not that long. She talks about the strength being this piece between the sexual energy and the heart space. And I think that is kind of a really unique way to look at it. And so if we think about the fortitude, the passion, the strength in that card, it can definitely come from sexual energy, but she really does a really nice way of kind of bringing that together. And so we have that connection between the second and the fourth chakra, which is lovely. Yes, she created the Way Home Tarot, which I don't have. And I believe the Way Home Tarot is based on the original. So these, I think it's based on the sketches that were in this book, but of course the tarot deck that was published has been changed. And so she's talking about strength here. We cannot and should not rid ourselves of our wildness. To do so would flatline life itself. But this archetype offers us an opportunity to have dominion over it. We are no longer at its mercy and are only enriched because of it. In strength, we reach a point where what we want to do and what we should do are the same. And I think the key here is that we are okay with that, because that is a huge quandary for a lot of us. I'm relatively new to tarot, but this book was very accessible. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And then she goes on to say, she says, where the higher and lower self are not warring with conflicting desires, where we may tame destructive impulses and transmute them into creative ones. And so I think that's a really helpful way to understand what that picture is with the lion and the woman, right? That inner fortitude, that inner strength creates this beautiful, beautiful piece. And what is that about when that comes after the Chariot? Because the Chariot is a super masculine, plowing ahead card, right? It's full of energy. It's full of strength. It's like permission to go ahead with your next project and everything else that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And then when we get to the Strength card, it's almost as if we have kind of tamed that inner passion, that almost the inner ego as well too, we're beginning to understand that we're not necessarily in charge. Like there's this fine line between taking the reins and guiding ourselves and allowing ourselves to be guided. And I think that's also what Bakara is talking about, right? Is that inner passion, that inner desire, that inner drive. We are able to we are able to be in right action. We are able to choose the right words. We're able to find that peace. There's no longer that point of wrestling. So think about the nuances when that experience happens after the Chariot, as opposed to when that experience happens after the Wheel of Fortune. So in the Wheel of Fortune, we are in a place where we may feel that we have been dealt an unjust turn of events, or perhaps we've had a positive turn of events, right? So the Wheel of Fortune can represent, either end of the spectrum. But when strength comes after that, it's about that inner peace and that inner resolve in dealing with whatever that turn of events was. So does that make sense? While it's both a strength card, and it's called lust, I believe it's called lust in the Thoth. It is exactly, it's very, very similar, but there is a subtle difference to its position. And that's not even getting into the numerology of it. I just want you to kind of understand or kind of get a feeling for, how it is different in one position than the other position. And then in the same way, if justice appears after the Chariot, as opposed to after the Wheel of Fortune, that is really kind of, hi Tito, that is, again, to me, even a bigger difference than strength. I think strength in either position is fairly easy to wrap your head around, but justice as number 8 and justice as number 11 is quite different. So let's kind of have a look at that. And I'm just going to look to my notes here because I've got quite a few things that I wrote down as I was kind of getting ready for tonight. So many great quotes from so many cool people. All right. I think what I would like to, I see how the placement can have a subtle shift in interpretation of 8 and 11. Thanks. Yeah, you're welcome, Sherry. And I think the 11, the Justice card, has so many different layers. And I started to talk about this and then I backed off because I wanted to finish what I was saying about strength. If in card 8 to card 14, we are beginning to turn internally and beginning to be more reflective about the lessons that we are learning, the archetypes that are presenting themselves in our life. What happens if a reading feels very legal, if it feels very three-dimensional world, if it feels very, very practical? Well, first of all, I think then you need to let it be that kind of advice. That might be the situation. But also, the way I see that kind of a reading is that is the best way to access the deeper layer of information, either for yourself or for the person across the table. So sometimes we can't be all esoteric. We can't be talking about spirit. We can't be talking about something that feels intangible. We need to be very, very practical. And 100%, I believe that everything that is happening on a day-to-day basis is a reflection of something else. So it might be the legal situation that has come up is going to be a reflection of something a little deeper that has other layers to it. But I think we can get to the nitty-gritty through the very practical. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't get too concerned if you feel that instead of dealing with karma and bigger issues, we're dealing with a lawsuit. But believe me, I truly believe that lawsuit is reflective of much, much bigger karmic patterns. I think on several decks, actually, that Justice card is called karma, or sometimes it's called balance, and all of those words will kind of help to peel away a more subtle layer if you're able to kind of deepen the perception of the reader, or if you're willing to go there yourself. So let's just kind of talk about the Justice card itself and what does it mean. I think more times than not, when the Justice card appears, it is a sign that, karmically speaking, energetically speaking, things are about to fall into place. And that might not necessarily feel good. That might not feel right for you. That might feel, that might not be the way you want things to go. Because, and you, it could be, can be talking to you, but it can be talking to the person you're reading for, because the querent, the client, is comfortable in their patterns. They like to do things a certain way. They've always done it a certain way. They've always spoken a certain way. They've always acted a certain way, behaved a certain way. And so sometimes when this Justice card comes up, it's like, it's a kind of a slap in the face, right? It's time to begin to shift that pattern. So can you see how Justice coming after the Wheel of Fortune makes really, really good sense to me? Because sometimes the Wheel of Fortune is like the first, it's like the universe introducing the concept of what this shift is going to be. And then the Justice card is about kind of looking at it in a different way, at a different level, and realizing that life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And the Justice card is about your reaction. It's about how are you going to move through this shift. And sometimes these shifts are very subtle, and sometimes these shifts are really, really loud. Okay. So what do you think of that? And I suppose I should talk about Justice after the Chariot, because that's a very different kind of energy. So in the Chariot, we definitely have two paths. We have a very ego-driven side. We have a more, right? We have the dark and the light. And then in the Justice, we have the one and the one. And so if you look at this numinous one that I showed you, you can see the moon and the sun down below. And so what is the shift moving from the Chariot to Justice if they're right after each other? And to me, the Justice in the 8th position is just taking the Chariot to another level. But it's quite a shift. And I don't read a lot of Thoth clone decks. Sorry, having my Thoth clone decks. Here is one that I use sometimes. Do you have this one? I know some people don't like this deck. There's a couple of cards in this deck that are quite controversial, but this is a card that I think is really beautiful. So this is the number 11 card. Sorry, the number 8 card. It's called Adjustment. And oh, I know what I wanted to talk about tonight. How many of you have seen the movie, The Adjustment Bureau? It's such a good movie if you have never seen it. I think that movie is the perfect way to understand the Justice card. Yes, that's the New Era. Here's the guidebook here. New Era Elements. So if you don't know the story, I'll just kind of, in a nutshell, I haven't seen it for a while, but there are these, I'm going to call them angels, for lack of a better word, that move around in trench coats, and they keep an eye on everybody's activity in this world. And when we steer off course, when we steer off plan, they create scenarios to get us back on plan. And the way that they know if we're on plan is they have these little books that have all these lines and dots that move around. It's such a cool concept, such a cool movie. And so I think the idea here is that we all have a plan karmically. And so what I understand is that we have family karma, we have our personal stuff, we also have geographic stuff going on with the land. And that's why we tend to, be in one country for a few years and then we move to another, or a different city or a different place, or sometimes we just stay in one place the whole time. But we have geographic karma as well as family and personal stuff. And so these adjusters help us to get back on path. And it's just a brilliant, brilliant notion. During the movie, however, the main character becomes aware of this, of the Adjustment Bureau, of the adjusters, and feels that they are wrong, that he indeed does need to follow a certain woman and they do need to get together, and he loves her very much, and he feels passionately that he needs to find a way for them to be together. And so I think the whole movie is this really beautiful balance between the Chariot and then skipping 7 cards later down to the process of the Justice card. And I don't know, it's just a really beautiful interplay between acting and letting go and all of this. And I don't want to spoil the movie for you if you haven't seen it, but please check it out. It's called The Adjustment Bureau. Anyway, that's what kind of comes up for me when I see this card. The Strength card in this deck is number 11. And if you don't have this deck, I'll just kind of share the story of this. So this is a lion, a male lion, and a male lion cub. And Eleanor, who is the creator of this deck, yes, Eleanor Piper, she talks about how the male lion can be quite violent and protective. However, if the lion is away from the pride and looking after the lion cubs on his own, and he doesn't have other lions to protect, that he will allow the lion cubs to wrestle with him and to jump on him and to bite and play, and he won't react in a strong, violent way. He'll be very, very peaceful with that relationship. And, it kind of speaks to like the Lion King. Remember the play between the Mufasa and Simba and things like that. So why am I going here? The reason I'm going here with that one has to do, and this kind of takes me back to where I started, and this was with the Tree of Life. And I am no expert on this by any means at all. But in the Tree of Life, the line that connects the line that represents the Strength card, okay, is connecting the right and the left pillar. And this, of course, is the second connection of the right. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can fast forward through this section, but this is really actually very interesting. And so the Strength card, oh, something just happened to my screen. The Strength card is about that connection and finding that peace between the masculine pillar and the feminine pillar. And it's really the first time that these two energies find this kind of harmony. And so the male lion in this story of this card has taken on a more maternal kind of behavior, right? Caring for and protecting and licking and playing with his lion cubs, as opposed to, being like this. There's this really beautiful harmony. I'm just going to read this to you. it's path 19. Path 19 connects mercy, which is 4, to strength 5, runs horizontally like a load-bearing beam. It is the ability to take personal power and do something with it. It moves from masculine to feminine, blending of opposite energies into a single unifying force. And so when we have a typical RWS card where we have the lion and the lady, there's something about that oneness that's being created, that force of the lion and the beauty and the softness of that woman is not two things, it's just one thing. I'm just going to read what Nina wrote here. There's a whole psychology behind rough housing. I forget the doctor who studied it, but the dynamic is the same in both humans and animals and serves a vital purpose in development. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. So I'm just checking the time. It's 51 minutes we've been on. I'm going to show you a few more cards, okay? Because I know you all love the cards. So I showed you the Magistrate. Oh, and this is the French version, by the way, of the Victorian Fairy. I don't have the English version. I have the oh, come on. I have the Russian one too, which I shared. I did a video. I don't know if you can see that too well. I did a video comparing the French version and the Russian version. So if you like the Victorian Fairy and you're not able to get your hands on it, both of these versions are available. And this one I got through Amazon France, and then the other one I think I got it on eBay. So isn't this a great strength card? When I saw this, I think this is one of the cards that made me fall in love with this deck. What is the name of the book on the Tree of Life? Oh, I'll get that for you in a minute. Okay, I'll have to stand up and go get it. Sherry, I'll try to remember. And if I forget, because I get distracted, can you comment below and then I'll write the name of the book in the comments below, okay? This deck is called the Victorian Fairy Tarot, and this card was one that just made me fall in love with this deck. I just really appreciated the peace between the beekeeper and the bees and that connection. It's kind of like in, oh, there's a really beautiful movie. Is it, oh, I can't think what it is. But you know, I'm sure you've seen it in lots of different movies, right? The bee charmer. The bee charmer puts her hands into the tree and is able to take a piece of a bit of honey away. And there's some kind of connection between that human and the bees. And it's like she's asked permission to take, from the bees, and there's no stinging, there's no drama in that. It's just really, really beautiful. And I think that's a really important thing, that whole asking permission thing, right? Asking permission, is it okay if I put my hand in the hive? It's just, I think that's something we need to remember too, right? If depending on what kind of practices you have, right? If we're even this time of year when we're making Yule decorations and, perhaps making a wreath or something like that, did you ask the tree if it was okay to clip those branches? And that's your strength and your humility in your connection with the tree and with nature. And that's another really, I think, a really important aspect of the strength card. This is this. Oh, you're not going to see this. This is the Slow Tarot by Lacey Bryant. Here's another one. This is quite beautiful. Her paintings are really lovely. But I wanted to show you that number 11 card. So this is it's called Balance. And in her description for this card, she uses the word detachment. And to me, this is really important in understanding the Justice card. And remember I talked about, it's called the Slow Tarot by Lacey Bryant. It's an indie deck. I don't know if you'll be able to see this because can you see that? Slow Tarot, that's the guidebook. I'm going to do a video of my top 5 for 2019, and I'm going to include the Slow Tarot, I think, in that. It's so hard. I'm going to do a VR to Simon's top 5 2019 tarot decks, but oh my God. Anyway, that's another video. So in her deck, in her guidebook, she talks about detachment. And I think that is another key thing in understanding the Justice card. So we go through these changes, we go through these shifts, and then karma kicks us in the butt. You know, something happens to bring life back into balance. The universe wants you to be in balance. The universe wants everything to come into balance, right? And so if we get off track, the universe is going to take charge. And sometimes these knocks are really subtle. Sometimes we don't notice them. Sometimes we don't pay attention. And these things happen again and again and again. And that's when we get hit with the tower, right? That's when it's really like a little more not so subtle. And I think that the Justice card is that first taste of it's really important to pay attention, right? And to really understand that life is happening for you. It's happening for you to keep you on path, to keep you on track. And some of these cards just do a really beautiful job in understanding that. So she calls this balance. And this is about being okay with everything as it is. And allowing your karma, if you will, to unravel in the way that it will. Here's one more. So I had the Herb Crafters on my table. Now, this is not a deck that I do readings with. And I don't know it well enough. I have only worked with a few cards in the deck, but because it was out, I decided to pull it out tonight and just see if I could really kind of wrap my head around the connections on this card to what we're talking about tonight. And so on the Strength card, we have garlic and honey, and we have roses. I just need to look and see where the roses are. Yeah, you can see there are rose petals around on the cutting board. Various places are rose petals. And in the guidebook, the description talks about, so garlic is very rajasic, Ayurvedically speaking. So it's very stimulating. It's very, very fiery. So like Bakara was talking about in this book, the garlic is like that sexual energy, right? It's that fiery, fiery energy. And the honey is the sweetness of the heart. And so it's that beautiful taming of these two energies, which results in this very peaceful inner strength. The rose petals, if you have this deck, you already know what the answer is. What are the rose petals doing on the cutting board? What do the rose petals have to do with this? If you, and like I said, I'd have to read from the guidebook, but I'm not going to do that right now. If you plant garlic around the roses, if you plant garlic around your rose bushes, the roses will become hardier. How cool is that? I just love these kind of gardening tips. So you will strengthen, so the garlic, the fiery garlic will strengthen the softness, the sweetness of the roses. Do you also know that so rose essential oil, roses in general, so if you collect roses, roses is the highest frequency that you can have. So if you are doing readings, if you want to kind of amp up your intuition, if you want to really move into like a different frequency, if you have rose petals, if you have rose essential oil, it is a really good way to begin to kind of up your game. Just saying. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, is about everybody has their routines and stepping into their readings and stuff. And if you, I think if your intention is to shift your frequency, to raise your frequency, you're going to have so much more luck with your intuition and being able to, actually interpret the downloads that you're receiving. Sometimes I think we're all downloading all the time. We're just not aware enough to kind of understand what these downloads are. So yeah. And so remember what I said about this one? And I think this is really odd, actually, that in a fairy deck, we have this magistrate here that looks, very legal and so forth. Because you'd think in the fairy world that this card would be kind of at a different level, but it's not. And in the Herb Crafters, we have a mandala of pot plants. And they are on top of, I'm going to have to read this to you. I don't know which document it is. This is actually really cool. A mandala of cannabis lies on top of a copy of the Declaration of Independence written on hemp paper. And then there's other things around it. And in the guidebook, she goes on to describe how this whole injustice with the harvesting of cannabis, the growing of cannabis, and using it for medicinal purposes has a horrible, horrible history in the United States, which I wasn't even aware of. So it's very, very appropriate that she included this on the Justice card. My point, however, is that this is a very legal interpretation of the Justice card. And so my challenge here is to take that point, to take her story. It has to do with Black culture. She says, a campaign targeting people of color criminalized marijuana use and shifted popular opinion, leading to the perception of cannabis as a dangerous drug. So I'm going to have to search that history a little further because she doesn't reference it in the guidebook. But to look at that at more of as a global teaching, and to see the big picture about that. Nina says, the deck seems far more readable than I initially thought. I want to get it now. It has a lot of different layers, but the guidebook doesn't. The guidebook is just an entry point. So if you want to know the plant medicine, if you want, like, for example, in this card, I don't know that historical reference point when that has to do with people of color and the banning of cannabis. So I'm going to have to research that because that's really, really interesting to me. But my point is, sometimes we have to take so this we're talking about here of the karma, the geographical karma of the United States and the different groups of people that are involved in that. And so how, for you, if you've picked this card, and if this is part of your story, how does that weave with the karma of the United States? And it's just fascinating. I love this stuff, right? It's just, I don't know, it keeps me up, keeps me researching, keeps me reading, and I just really, really enjoy all that. Yeah, it's really mind-blowing. Part of my geographical karma has to do with Japan. And I lived there for 3 years, and I've been back many times. And unweaving that geographical karma is so really, really interesting. I have had many lifetimes in lots of different Asian countries, and I'm just beginning. I have a really beautiful teacher who does what does she call them? Karmic pattern readings. I forget what it is. Anyway, she's really helped me to unravel my patterns at a really, really deep level through my karmic connections with other cultures, and it's been mind-blowing. So I really kind of resonate when that challenge arises to connect political, like somebody was asking on Facebook group, Tarot Facebook group, Tarot Nerds today, about the election in England, and if anybody had done a spread or a reading about that election. And those kinds of questions, it's really nice if you can tie in that political situation, because that, if that wasn't of interest to you, to as like, what is that mirroring back for you? So these mirrors are really, really important. Sherry says, wow, geographical karma. I think we can reference it if we are made aware to look for it. For sure, for sure. So yeah, so I don't know, I kind of feel like I jumped all over the place tonight, and I hope that at least, if nothing else, this is food for thought. I am not an expert. I am just somebody who loves to play with the tarot, and I love to work with people to, you know, to be in service. And if I can help to shine a light for somebody where they aren't seeing clearly, I think, you know, my job is done. And I really love that bit about working with people through all of the different modalities that I use. So if you haven't signed up for the draw, please do that in the comments of the 1,000 sub giveaway video. And next week, so I don't know if we're just going to talk about this only, or what I'm going to tie into it, but there was a comment about one of the decks that I shared in the collage collection videos, and the Enchanted Tarot was the deck of question. And Cindy asked about the Ten of Swords in this deck, and she was quite alarmed and upset by the Ten of Swords in this deck. And I know in a lot of decks, the Ten of Swords is a kind of a make it or break it card. If there's too much blood, if something has been killed or pierced or damaged, it can really be it can really be heart shaking. And so I think I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the Ten of Swords and how I see the whole suit of swords and how I see that culmination in the Ten of Swords, because I think I see it a little bit differently than a lot of people do. And maybe I can share some. Oh, and Nina, please go ahead and type out your topic either here or in the comments below later, because yeah, I'm happy to talk about pretty much anything that you have a request for. So if you have any questions, or if you have requests, if you have particular decks where cards are really bugging you, you just can't quite figure it out, even after reading the guidebook, that kind of thing, I'm happy to do my best to try to piece that together for you. So yeah, ethical responsibility in tarot reading. Yeah. So would you like to expand on that? Or if you have a particular situation, Nina, um, and because I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Do you mean when, I don't know, it's a really big question about ethics. I am, so integrity is a really important word for me. So I will definitely, if, for example, if I go into a reading and I am not getting anything, I will end the reading and not charge the person for it. I won't charge them for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long we've sat there. I'll just say, I'm just not feeling it, or I have my own little spiel, and I will not do the reading if for some reason I feel that it's just not an appropriate time to do a reading. Nina says, I have found it disheartening to see the number of unethical readers here on YouTube. Maybe I live in La La Land or have my head on the clouds. Um, you know, I don't, there's, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 different YouTubers that I watch regularly. And some of them like if I see somebody who's reading in a way that I don't agree with, I don't watch their channel. Integrity is so very, very important. And I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this to be of service. And I think if you come from that point of view, how can I serve you today? I ask that to every single person I see. That's my question. How can I be of service? And if they say, I mean, not too many people do this, am I going to win the lottery? I'll just say, that's not what I do. That's not what I do. That's not my job. My job is to help you, move through some stuff you're moving through right now. And maybe I will say, why do you want to know if you're going to win the lottery? And if they are open to having that kind of a discussion, then maybe that will take us the right way. I wish there were a code of conduct in this realm. Nina, at the store where I do readings, we actually have a code of conduct on the wall. And if you like, I could get a copy of that and share it if you're interested. Yeah, it does get upsetting when you feel yeah, I'll take a photo of it, or I'll try to make a copy of it. I think it's in a frame and I can't really take the frame. I don't think it's in an easy take apart frame, but I'll take a photo of it and I'd be happy to share that. Yeah. So I think if you have had an experience yourself, like if you have paid for a reading and you feel like you are being swindled, you feel like the reader is not genuine, like they're making stuff up, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're talking about, then I think you have the right to end it. Just like I said, like I would end a reading if I had a bunch of bells and whistles going off, or I felt like I wasn't getting anything. I would end the reading. And I think you as a recipient as well too have that right. Wow, I'm not connecting with you. Can we end this now? I think that's important for you to be able to say that too. So yeah. I don't have a deck here to pull a card for tonight, so I'm just going to wish you well, and again, encourage you, if you're on the West Coast, just to get out and say hello to the full moon tonight. West Coast in about an hour and 15 minutes, a little bit longer than that. The full moon will be at its fullest. So for those of you that have already said hello to the full moon, good morning on Friday or wherever you are, and thank you for being here tonight. I hope to see you again soon. And I'll just say namaste. Stay well, my friends.